Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Independence Day Talk 2020. My journey in the field of education began 15 years ago when I founded Globed with my father and sister. What started as a business proposition turned into a mission of giving students from different backgrounds an opportunity to expand their horizons by enabling them to study abroad. Over the years, with experience and knowledge, and through testimonies of students we sent abroad, I developed a critical approach to the philosophy of education. I learned that colleges around the world offer a fabulous feast with a wide array of courses, extracurricular activities, opportunities of collaborative thinking, and practical experience. Teachers prepare their own course content, and students are free to decide which ones they want to pick for their plate. They are allowed to make mistakes, flower late, and change paths. I realized that those students in our country do gain admission into the best colleges abroad. Many lag behind in English language and writing skills, in independent, critical, and creative thinking, and in vision, confidence, and social skills. I came to believe strongly that our education system must equip students if they choose to study further abroad and must provide a similar horizon broadening educational experience at home if they choose to stay here. The government has taken up this challenge finally. Our education policy, which hadn't moved in an experimental way since independence, is now undergoing a radical restructuring that far exceeds the reforms of 1968 and 1986. The new education policy is comprehensive and detailed, but broadly speaking, attempts to incorporate the best educational concepts from abroad and open doors to foreign students and universities. In doing so, it recognizes that we live in an interconnected world where adaptability and the free exchange of ideas is crucial to a rich life, to global understanding and peace, and indeed, as the pandemic shows, to survival itself. At the forefront, this new policy seems exciting, but will it really be what it aspires to be? Will it truly provide students with the flexibility in choosing what they want to study? Will it build in transparency, accountability, and autonomy from political agenda? Will it be democratic or further enhance the divide between the privileged and the non-privileged? Will its implementation succeed or be fraught with temptations of corruption? These are some of the questions we seek to find answers to. Ladies and gentlemen, education is the most important aspect of a young person's life. Globe Ed is presenting this platform with the hope that the exchange of ideas today will give students, parents, and teachers a better understanding of the pros and cons of the Education Policy 2020. We have with us an eminent cultural activist, Mr. S.V. Raman, popularly known as Raju Raman. Retired as Program Director of Max Miller Bhavan, Kolkata. He is presently Program Consultant at Victoria Memorial Hall, teaches public speaking, communication, soft skills, film, German at various institutions, and is a freelance journalist, translator, and interpreter. He's actively connected with several social and cultural organizations in various capacities. Presently, he is president of the Senior Academy, Indo-German Association, Vichitra Pathshala, chairman of the Creative Arts, secretary of Mano Vikas Kendra, and Sahai, as well as governing committee member of the Calcutta School of Music. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Raju Raman, who will moderate our Independence Day Talk 2020. I would start with introducing Aditi Bhutoria. Aditi has studied and worked at London School of Economics, Cambridge University, Harvard Kennedy School. Her professional and research experience include work on public policy issues. Her current research focuses on design, delivery, and impact of education policy and related technological interventions across developing and developed countries.
Thank you so much, Priti. I'm very excited about the session today and looking forward to having this discourse on NEP. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Aditi. Ms. Bratati Bhattacharyya, we know is the Foundation Secretary of Sri Shikshayatan College.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, I started my career as an investment banker for 7 years, and then I moved to education, being a high school teacher, and then a school principal, an education officer, and now I'm the Secretary General of Shikshayatan Foundation. That's how my journey has been. I love, you know, education is my passion, and I would love to talk about national education policy today, because I think there are a lot of hope, but a lot of questions which needs to be answered. So I look forward to the evening.
Thank you, Ms. Bratati. Thank you so much. And now I
introduce myself as well.
Yes, you can.
All right. No, so it might be easier that way. So hello, everyone, and well, good evening. I hope you all had a very nice Independence Day today. So I am Sebastian Schwecke. I understand that my family name is very difficult to pronounce for many Indians if they see it written. So please call me Sebastian if you prefer that. I am an associate professor at the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. I've joined here in 2018. Before I held several positions in Germany, and I am not from education studies or an education practitioner, apart from the fact that I'm teaching at a university. I am an economic historian. So some of the more detailed questions will definitely have to go to Aditi and Bratati rather than to me. Yeah, with that introduction, I think I can pass on again to either Smriti or Raju.
Okay, I think if you have nothing more to add, Smriti, I could take over.
Yes, please.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bratati Bhattacharyya, Aditi Bhutoria, and Sebastian Schwecke, not all that difficult to pronounce, for joining this panel discussion today. Smriti has already raised a lot of questions in her introductory remarks. If we were even to address about 60–70% of those questions, we would be here talking till 9 o'clock this evening, okay? But let us make the most of it now and see what are the main questions that we can address, because this particular topic that we are going to talk about today is extremely important in today's day and time, and it is very, very topical, and it has come at a time when it is possibly needed the most. But having said that, it does not necessarily mean that everything is hunky-dory about what the policy says. So there must be some kind of ups and downs, some things that people agree with, some things people don't agree with, some things people raise their doubts about as to how they will be implemented. So these are some of the questions we are going to discuss today. We are not going to find solutions. It is not our job to find solutions, but maybe to suggest some solutions if we see that there are some things which can be done in a better way. Ever since I have seen that old film, Sound of Music, I have always followed the policy that let us start at the very beginning, the basics, yeah? So it's a very good way to start, as they say. And that's why I would like to start with Bratati Bhattacharyya, because we have to start from the basics, and she is where the basics are, the school as well as the college, right? So would you like to begin by telling us this new education policy at a glance? What are its immediate and direct implications at the school level, that 10+2 being converted to 5+3+4? How do you see that panning out? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you see some roadblocks on the way? And if so, what would be the major roadblocks?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Raman. See, the new education policy 2020 definitely has taken a quantum jump, and it is very optimistic, and there are a lot of inputs. The first thing which I like about it is that, you know, it talks about equity and it talks about inclusion. Now, when we talk about the school level, here the change, which is a major change which has come in, is that 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. So the early childhood learning, which was not there, that has been added. And this is really a very good move. Earlier, what was happening was that the early childhood learning would be with only some of the elite schools, and they had this pre-primary section, and some of the Montessori schools which are there scattered in the city, but not at every level. The school had started at the age of 6. So this is a major change which has come in, which is 5 plus 3 plus 3. So the first part is the foundational part, where you are going to have a playway method. Then you have a preparatory thing, which is for 3 years. And this 3 years will be on the base of experiences, the experiential learning. And that moves to the middle school also. And later, you are doing the secondary. Now that part was earlier secondary and higher secondary, but now it is only secondary education. Now, what are the changes which has come in? The changes is that you are open to a vocational course which is coming in at class 6. Even in class 6, coding will be taught. Coding was earlier not even thought that it could be taught at the school level, but these kind of skills have been added to the school level. Now, earlier, even if I go back 15-16 years back, the vocational course was there, but it was taken as a secondary. People who were coming from open schools were doing these vocational courses, which is on-the-job training. But today, when you link it up with employment, that is the output. Here, a lot of things have been told about the input, which is very good. But we also need to understand the output. So when you think about employability, you need to have these skills. And these skills, which are going to be taught from class 6 level, is a very good move. And it will be integrated not only at the school level, but also with the higher education level. Now, the question here lies that even today, CBSE has introduced this vocational course, not today, but many years back, and now it has been integrated with the other general subjects. The problem or the issue which the children find is that when they take up these subjects, they are not accepted by the higher education. So there is a missing link here. So those subjects are not there and they are not accepted by the higher education. Now, this is something which needs to be looked into. This is one of the issues. Second is that we are talking about different languages. Now, what happens that when you have a mother who is maybe from Gujarat and a father who is from Bengal, what does the child take up? Does the child take up Bengali or the child takes up Gujarati? If I have a father or the mother who gets transferred, because we have to also think about the demography and the kind of country that we are living at. So if in our country we have so many languages, how does one take into account when you are getting transferred? So this is another question which you have, that what happens to the local language, the regional language, your mother tongue? How do you define your mother tongue? So these are the two main challenges that I see here. The next is, when you are going to, should I continue, Mr. Raman? Or
yes, I had said that. I suggested that all of you go on initially for about 7 to 8 minutes, and then we come back with interactions.
Yes. So the skill base is very good because it starts with the digitization, and we have seen during the COVID time that the digital skills, which we started off as, having an education coming into technology, and this has really helped us because all of us are now using only technology. So children have to be, educated not only in digital skills, even teachers need to be educated with digital pedagogy. So, now what we have is a B.Ed course which do not have digital pedagogy. So what is happening is now we as some of the educational institutes on their own, they are seeing that their teachers get educated in this line, but it has to become a formal part of our B.Ed course, that every subject is taught in the digital mode also, because there are many tools. There are three things which comes in. The content cannot be same as face-to-face teaching. So all these content needs to be looked into, the platform and the tools that you are using. So it is not an education only from the teacher's point of view, it is also from the point of view of the students and also from the point of view of the parents, because all three people have to come on board to take the digital skills forward. And definitely we have to have the bandwidth and also availability of the system, that is either your phone or your laptop and other things, which needs to be available if I'm talking at the national level. Now, if I move forward and if I'm talking about opening doors and, saying about credits, credit is a very good thing which has been added, that, you can do 1 year and then you can also take a break and come in and do a second year. But the question lies here that today, if you are saying that, some of them you're going to give autonomy and some you're not going to give autonomy, my question here is that if I do in a particular college, a particular course for 1 year, and I want to come back and I join some other college, will that college accept that particular degree? Even though it is under HECI, I may say that, well, I don't accept that college, what they have taught. So this is a big question. Plus, when I'm taking, when different subjects are being offered, like with chemistry, I can offer, say, political science, or I can offer a language. The schools or the college, you need to have the logistics in place. So can it be like this, that today I choose a school and I have a, maybe, the streams which we used to have, we cannot then have a science stream or a humanities stream or a commerce stream, because it will be all mixed and match. I can take accountancy with physics or anything, music. Now, maybe a particular school that I choose do not have a particular subject. Will it be that I do a physical class in a school that I have taken, which is a primary school, and I do an online course in some other school which gives that particular subject? How will that be tackled? So these are the questions which I'm having. Apart from that credit which I spoke of, the next thing is that today we are talking about, cross-border education which is borderless. And especially I'm talking about the medical education. Now, medical education in India is controlled by the Medical Council of India. Lot of children do not get admission here, and then they go to some of the different countries. Like before 2018, all the people, when they went outside the country, they had to give this FMGE examination. But suddenly in 2018, the rule was changed. For some of the countries, the children do not have to give this FMGE exam, but for some countries they have to give. When this course has been already recognized by NCI and WHO, my question here is that why this discrimination for some of the children, and why this FMGE examination is not at par with any other examination? The question papers are also not available to the students. So is it an elimination? Or are you really wanting the children to come back to their country and serve? So when we talk about brain drain, I think we all need to look into these aspects, that why are we doing that? What is the reason? Is examination one tool to see whether the child can perform, or is it assessment that we need to look at, or we need to train the children so that they get accustomed to our country's problem? Even if I see ICMR, how many researches are being done there? We really don't stand anywhere, because ICMR is one of the oldest research institutes in medical science, but hardly we have done anything. We have given importance to research area, and I hope that, you know, we will have more researchers doing work, and that should probably increase at least 100%, because now I think about 50,000 people are giving research papers. It should at least become double what we are getting. And we are talking about a gross enrollment ratio, which should increase to 50%, and now it is 26%. That also, if you look at by 2030 or 2035, that means those children at present are going to be in school. So at the level of maybe class 3 or class 5, and they are the ones, you know, will be the youth, the new generation whom we are actually talking of. And you know, so to make them future ready, yes, I think.
Okay, if you could just wind up in a couple of sentences now.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I think I've raised a lot of questions, and as time goes, you know, I think we'll be also answering more questions, and I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for those initial remarks. On the whole, you have been very welcoming about this new national education policy overall, though you have raised a few questions as well. But on the whole, the impression one gets from what you said is that you think that it is very, very welcome at this stage. Right. You have talked about inclusivity, and you have also at one point mentioned about elite schools, which are providing a lot of facilities. Before moving on to the next panelist, I just want to ask an interim question. Do you consider Sri Shikshayatan to be an elitist school?
We are for all, because, you know, we have first generation learners, and you know, our motto has been a little different, you know, so we cater to different people or different types of students. So
not an elitist school.
So, you know, when but we do provide with a lot of facilities. In fact, all the facilities.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to move on to Aditi Bhutoria now. You see, Aditi has been working on a lot of policies. You see, kind of expertise is in the area of policies. Now, is merely announcing a policy or a change of policy enough? Aren't there a lot of gaps between the policy and the implementation? And don't they have to be taken into account simultaneously before you grandiosely announce a kind of policy? And of course, there are certain objectives when you announce a national education policy. And one has said in this document that the focus is going to be on regular formative assessment rather than on summative assessment, which has encouraged the culture of coaching and tuitions. So do you think that with the implementation of the new policy, all this coaching and tuition business is going to go out of business? Is another thing I would like you to touch upon. And of course, this proposed multidisciplinary approach by 2040, as I say, which is a long way off, and the kind of STEM courses, as they call it, will it promote critical thinking really away from the rote learning system, innovation and team skills? And what is the role that technology is going to be playing in future education?
Right. I think as I'm growing older, Mr. Raman, my capacity of processing multiple questions at the same time, unfortunately, is going down.
It was a multiple choice.
Yeah, that's more MBA-like. Yeah. But okay. I mean, thank you for a series of great questions, actually. And I'm really glad I'm coming in after Bratati shared her points of view, because I think she really did cover in a very short amount of time most of the important issues which were crippling the education sector, which eventually led to a transition, and then the policy document in the form of the draft NEP last year and the NEP this year. In fact, if you really talk to people working in MHRD and other places, you get to know that they've been working on this idea and the document for more than 5 to 6 years, right? So, you know, I think you've raised a very important fundamental question on the role of policy and policy makers in the education space. And, you know, we need to be very clear about what this document is seeking to do. And it is only answering the question of what. I do not think the document is going to answer in a lot of details the answer, the question of how will it be done. And I'm hoping that given that we've been, and I'm quite appreciative of this policy personally, the draft NFP was much bigger, much more detailed. I did a full assessment of it last year, and I realized that almost everything I could think of post-independence, which the Indian education system or the global education system needed, was in it. In contrast, this new education policy is a more concise version of it, which kind of gives me a bit more appeasement, because I know that not everything can be done. We are living in a world with limited resources. We will be always conflicted with what is our priority. And the more we go a little focused on certain specific areas, the better it is in terms of implementation and the how of it, right? But as a policy document, NEP does justice. It's a directional document at the end of the day. It's a document which is being taken out by the central government, and education is a state subject in India. So a lot of it is subject to interpretation, subject to how a state would take that forward in terms of, say, for instance, when they talked about this multilingualism in schools, and the first 5 to 8 years you must be studying different languages together, and the value of regional languages, which Bratati mentioned herself. I feel that there was a tweet immediately after by the MOE saying that now MOE, the Ministry of Education, saying that wherever possible. So that basically reflects how we look at these policies when it comes to implementation. We put it there and then we say as much as possible, as long as possible, and however possible. So I feel that we need to take it with a pinch of salt, that it's a policy level document, it's a directional document, it is in no way a law or a cast in stone. It is subject to interpretation. And if you look at the diverse country India is in terms of religion, in terms of language, in terms of regional languages, cuisine, in terms of dress codes, in terms of every single way, it is possibly important to have that customization element. So that's one. In terms of what is the implementational possibility here, I'm really hoping in the coming years, I just see this as a starting document personally. And I'm hopeful that in the coming months and over the, before the next budget, we'll have some, more specific logic models. We'll have more specific inputs and indicators, which we are trying to measure to understand how much we've really fulfilled of this policy over the next 10 years. What are the short-term goals? What are the long-term goals? There's already a conversation on that. Like, we are already saying that certain things we want to meet in the next 5 years, whereas certain elements, say, doing away with the accreditation of colleges and all, we want to do away with that gradually, over a period of time. So I feel that over some time, we'll get more clarity on how this policy will translate into implementation. Right? And we should wait up for that to truly critique as well. That's one. With respect to your point on testing and coaching institutes and all, I know Smriti and Global Ed is here. So, but I would say I'm also quite optimistic about the role of the market in the education sector. Market comes into a situation when there's a government failure, and coaching institutes is nothing but a market entering the education space to enter something which, say, the public schools or certain private schools were not able to give. There could be two parts to it. There's one part which is purely based on the quality of education. What is the quality of education that's been imparted in these schools? If it's not sufficient, then a student might choose to go to a coaching institute. And then the second is to pass and cram up and kind of give examinations, right? If we make examinations easy, and we have teachers here and we have professors here, like fellow profs like Sebastian's here, anybody who's been in the education sector will tell you that making exams easy is not the solution for anything. It doesn't mean much at all. It is not about making sure everyone passes, because examination is a great way, again going back to the fundamentals of why we need examination, is a great way to discriminate and distinguish candidates from each other. And if we have limited, again, opportunities, if the economic institutions and systems of the country are such that there is no, not a 1:1 job opportunity once you pass out of school or whatever else, the examination system and the marks that come out of it needs to be authentic, needs to be rigorous, and we need to be sure that it is being able to distinguish the good candidates from those who were probably not, who didn't put in that much effort to start with. So I feel that even though the intention is absolutely right in terms of going into low stakes examinations and formative assessments, which are more regular assessments based on your competencies and your learning, we need to be clear about how that feeds in, as Bratati also mentioned, into latter institutions, whether it's the labor market or whether it's tertiary education, and what is the synergy between different steps of education going there, right? So that was the second bit, and the third bit, on critical thinking. So I'll quickly sum up some points which I really found important, which were raised earlier, is that according to me, and not kind of going into this MBA jargon again, but according to me, there are almost like 4 T's which are really, really important that have come out from this policy. The first is definitely looking at teachers. Identifying an old problem of poor quality teachers and addressing that at multiple levels, and we can discuss about it more when we come to interaction. The second, of course, is the idea of tools and openness of subjects. So bringing in liberal arts, bringing about various kinds of tools for critical learning, for non-cognitive skill development, so on and so forth. The third is testing, which has to go side by side with the former two. You cannot make reforms in teachers and quality education processes and tools and techniques without changing drastically your assessment structures, because that is what helps you monitor, that is what ensures accountability, that is what helps you give evidence to understand what's working and what's not. And fourth, according to me, and a very critical element, which we can come to later because it's cross-cutting, is technology. So technology has come in not just in the previous budgets, but also in the NEP at all levels, and the role of and value of technology, the ethics behind it, the rigorous evidence collection behind it has to be defined at our end. So I think I would stop here, and there's of course this point you raised on critical thinking, but I think let's probably leave it to the interaction time, and I'm sure we'll all come up with a lot of points there.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was all wonderfully put over here, particularly the 40s, which you insisted is not IIM jargon, with the
Let's try to believe that.
Teachers, tools, and the third one, which you used, is something that we see in the newspapers every day, and not necessarily in a positive sense, about testing for COVID, you see. So that is what is happening all the time, and technology, of course. We'll come back to that, certainly. We will now move on to Sebastian Schwecke. Sebastian, Aditi already mentioned that you'll get a clearer picture when we come to the next budget, yeah, and that is very important, and that is a good transition point to actually go to you. The question of funding, all these great ideas, unless there is sufficient funds earmarked for all this, or ascertained where it is going to come from, what is the use of talking so big, if you're not going to have the funds to implement them? And of course, language policy has already been touched upon by the two panelists. I would also like to have your views on that and the question of the language policy. And if the language policy is implemented, what is going to happen at a later stage when you come to higher education or to a professional level? Will this kind of impair in any way the communication skills of the persons across geographical borders within the country as well, right? And then, of course, is this new education policy really going to reverse the brain drain? Is it going in that direction? Is it going to happen? And you possibly may also like to touch upon the socio-economic structure and how it is related to these kind of policy making, and whether liberal arts education, as we call it in the future, is going to generate that kind of employability that is desired by us and for a population like a country in India.
Well, thank you for that. I actually take my cue from what Aditi was saying, but Bratati was actually going in similar directions. So let me first state, like, right out, I think this is a welcome first step in many ways, even though there are problems that are going to be associated with this policy. But at the same point of time, there are certain issues that actually have been addressed that might be beneficial in the long run. So coming to a broader view, as somebody who's not from education studies, in that way, will it actually fulfill all these hopes that a new policy like that is going to be raising? Will it, or will it be having the kind of problems that some of its critics are actually pointing out? No, so if you look at this, basically the question of funding, as you were implying already, cannot actually be taken out. Funding is the big problem in Indian education. It's a much bigger problem than any other problem that has been associated with Indian education, basically. India is not spending enough money on education in general. So will the policy address that? The policy documents actually say, yes, they will do this, but they don't do this in a very plausible way. Like the idea to raise it, the education spend to 6% or something, is not something that I personally see in any future that is still foreseeable, basically. Especially not now. There are currently other problems here as well. The state will have other priorities than actually increasing money on education right now. Looking at it from in this way, basically, so it's a kind of reform that might have potential, but the potential might get lost along the way as long as the spending is not increased significantly. What is even worse in this, and this is one of my biggest criticisms actually on this policy, is changing things to such a drastic extent when you're not actually going to increase funding a lot. So that is actually something that leads to a lot of wasteful expenditure. You will have to invest in completely new infrastructure to, for example, follow up on the medium of instruction policies. So this investment will come from about the same spending that you have before, because the spending can't be raised to such an extent. So that is going to be a major problem. Let me use this to shift to the next point, the language policy. So very clearly upfront, I personally believe that English medium teaching in India is a dead end. So it is something that actually will not be capable of overcoming some of the bottlenecks in the education sector that you have in India, despite the fact that at the highest end, it actually might have some beneficial impacts. So, but the policy shouldn't look at the highest end only. No? So in that way, this kind of shift towards the mother tongue, whatever that is in each and every circumstance. So that is something that I personally see very much in favor of that. I think that most people, most children who actually are in an English medium school in India will have problems with English medium instruction. And in that way, taking out English will actually be positive. However, and now we're coming back to the funding, for that you need, in order to have the same kind of English proficiency levels, you would then have to invest heavily in teaching English as a foreign language. And that is an important part of the Indian economy because it's important for the highest levels of employment. So will that happen? Will there be a massive investment in that way? I don't personally see that. And in that way, even the language policy of the NEP is to some extent likely to be botched in many ways. So that's about the implementation, but also about the money that is being spent on that. Coming to the, I mean, there are many actually, like many other issues around this language policy. This is one of the main reasons why the policy has been considered controversial. But these have nothing to do with education, and I don't actually want to go into details of that. I personally believe that one of the reasons, but not necessarily the most important one, is actually for changing the policy in that way, away from English medium instruction, is actually linked to non-education purposes. But right here, that's not something that I want to discuss, and as a historian, we'll anyway see how it pans out in the long run. Okay, so the idea of a reversal of the brain drain. So that is something that where I have to take a somewhat amusing position, basically. So basically, the better Indian education is going to work, the more India will suffer from a brain drain. That's something that cannot be escaped. So as educationists, the better that we are, the more we're actually supporting the brain drain. The socio-economic structure of India is not sufficient to actually attract people of like the highest levels of education to the extent that most of these would actually stay here or want to stay here. There will always be competition for these people. These are highly educated young persons, and they are going to shift abroad if they have the choice, because abroad will offer them something that they will conceive as better. So in that way, the more education policy benefits from any reform, the brain drain will actually get better. So the idea that is being bandied about in some of the media, that the brain drain can be reversed, that is something that I don't actually understand how that would ever happen. Lastly, and that is another point, like the idea of creativity. So, and one of the talking points that Smithy was originally sending me when I was invited to join this was the idea, like, will moving towards a liberal arts, multidisciplinary kind of education system provide the creativity that is needed, instill in those children the creativity that is needed in order to fulfill the needs of what is being called the fourth industrial revolution, the introduction of artificial intelligence in an economic setting. So there, I have to say, this is another relatively amusing argument for myself, because I am a historian, and the idea that a technology will become so important in everyday life for people, it actually will dominate employment without being standardized to the level where you don't actually need that creativity anymore. That is something that in each and every technology you can see over long periods of time. The one part of a new technology that will continue to need high levels of creativity is actually in setting up that kind of technology, not in applying it. But the Indian economy will, for the foreseeable future, be much more likely to actually apply what is being provided by other countries. And that's not only the West anymore, that will also be China for the foreseeable future, for the next decades. So since that is the case, now I'm personally coming from the social sciences and history, so it's not something I don't want to run down liberal arts education. That's what I'm doing myself. But we, as people who are proponents of liberal arts education, should not actually narrow down the reasons why we are doing this, why we think liberal arts education will make students better people. So to very narrow reasons of employability. Most of the employment in India will be so heavily standardized in the kind of work practices, even if it's highly paid, that this kind of liberal arts education will have other positive effects on the students, but not necessarily be something that they need in their work environment. So with these points, I think I'm also beyond my 7 minutes, and I pass back to you, Raju.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you very much. That was indeed very comprehensively touching on all the points that were raised. Now I come back to all of you on the basis of the statements that you made. I'm coming back to Bratati. Now, Sebastian has been saying that, you have to give English language education a special status, and you have to, that he welcomes the policy that is mentioned that there has to be learning in the mother tongue or in the vernacular in the early stages. Do you think this is a progressive step or a regressive move?
Well, you see, we have been, again, there are different types of schools, and when we are talking about increasing the education enrollment, then definitely what Sebastian is saying, I agree with him, that if people are comfortable learning in their own language, then that needs to be encouraged, because here I'm talking about the learning part. And about the language part, yes, definitely, I can pick up that language at a different stage when I'm talking as a, from a national angle. So here, the learning outcome is very important. If I focus on that only. But yes, when it comes to only, conversing with the global world, there definitely my English will play a very, very important role. So at some stage, unless you are able to communicate and be able to express your own understanding with the world, you may be segregated. So that may not be welcoming. So the stage has to be clarified at, that when do they then learn the language? At what stage? It is all understood that if you have to go down to different levels, and if you want people to come into education, the mass education that I'm talking about, massification, then definitely we have to allow this way. Otherwise, probably we will not be able to reach our target or our objective or goals in learning.
Yeah, but what about preparing teachers for that kind of a situation? That is another big project
Definitely.
altogether. Yeah.
Today, if I'm talking about languages like Sanskrit, I have a question that, at least from my, when we studied in school, Sanskrit was actually not there. Some of the schools did not have it. So where do you even find teachers to teach such subjects? That is also a big question. So again, we need to, relook at that as to the availability of teachers. And you see, if you go by, getting teachers at the school level, I think this is something which all of us need to question, that who takes up a school teacher's job? When you do not get into any other, other professions, that is the time you're coming to school level. Many people have not come by choice into school education. They have come by, again, elimination. To teaching. It is not that I'm getting an university topper to teach my foundation level education, which is there in many of the countries. They choose the people from the, who are toppers and who are very good with concepts are coming and teaching the youngest most. But here we have it is totally different here. We say, okay, there are some places, when they're teaching the Montessori, even people with a 12th grade is teaching a Montessori school. So this is something, again, a policy matter, which needs to be looked into.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go to Aditi now. You see, they are forcing one overarching body for higher education, yeah, which is going to be called probably the Higher Education Commission of India, right? And this is going to be responsible for all grants, funding, standards, and accreditation. How do you view this? Do you think that is going to work? That's going to function?
Right. So I actually had a few points on the discussion which was going on right before this on
Please go
teachers and
ahead.
language. So I think I'll start with that and then come to your very important point.
Right.
So I just kind of, yeah, I kind of prima facie agree with Sebastian there that the value of regional language is really important, and the fact that we are thinking about trilingualism, almost having 3 languages in the initial foundational years. Now, I would have gotten really worried about this if it was told to me that this is the only language, like happened in the draft NEP. They said Hindi was the only language which would be used for some time, and that led to such a lot of public uproar. But then this one is flexible. It says that 1 is English and 2 could be any other regional languages. So firstly, I like that flexibility, but more importantly and fundamentally, Mr. Raman, just want to bring out that point, and I know Sebastian alluded on this a little bit, is that education sector really plays 2 kinds of roles. There is this intrinsic role, the value of education, the value of learning a new language, but there is an instrumental role. And we cannot talk about the education sector without really talking about the system and the organization and the society it persists in. So language is fundamentally the most discussed element in an NEP or the draft NEP and all the time, because it's so significantly connected with our cultural history, right? And the point is that when we are teaching a language in school, we're ensuring it doesn't fossilize, it doesn't die, it's an unnatural death. Since 1960s, I think we've had more than 200 languages which were minor languages just deplete, just pass over. And our cultural history, more than 5,000 years old, in terms of the education setup, is too valuable to just let it go. So I think that sometimes, certain policies also come from the perspective of being instrumental to a larger social setup rather than just being intrinsic about teaching in a language or the other. So that's just a quick point, and I wanted to expand on what Sebastian was hinting, because I thought that was a really important thing to think about other sectors. And and with respect to the question which you asked, when was the last time we got to know 2 bodies were doing the same job in India and they did a better job than 1 body doing the same? So I feel consolidation is a very good thing. Especially in higher education and skill development, there's been a time in India in skill development, 17 ministries simultaneously have a role to play. So there are different projects which are multiplicating, which are duplicating the same job, coming in with different levels of fundings, and so there's mismanagement. And sometimes I feel like, and especially, I feel personally, it's very inherently related to the fact that now we are trying to make higher education, tertiary education, and vocational education more seamless. We are now trying to integrate that. And when we are trying to integrate that, what is the sense of having a separate UGC and AICTE, which is for technical education? It makes more sense technically and administratively to have a single body, because now we are saying that vocational education is no longer that part of education which you go to when you can't get in anywhere else. It's no longer that part of education which you value because you just need a particular diploma. It's a part of education you can choose to do as a student from an elite tertiary education system as a secondary credit worthy diploma, as a secondary supplemental diploma. So and that's fascinating for me, because biggest issue for vocational education has been the stigmatization of the same, and we look down upon it. And because we are now integrating it at all levels, we are trying our best to do that. I don't know why we shouldn't integrate it at an administrative level by setting up a single authoritative body.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. I'll move on to Sebastian. Sebastian, you did mention that we are on the threshold, so to speak, of the 4th industrial revolution, right? And all this importance being attached to, and it is an inevitable kind of thing, that artificial intelligence is going to come to rule a lot of sectors in our life, right? And artificial intelligence and digitization is probably going to make many skilled jobs in certain areas redundant. How do you think this is going to work out? Because say in areas like accountancy, in even the legal profession and so on, if artificial intelligence and digitization is going to take care of a lot of things, then there are whole sets of people who will be rendered unemployed. So what does one do about these kind of people? Do we think of alternative sources of employment for them, or how do we go about it?
Okay, so first let me clarify this one point. So I guess that artificial intelligence is going to be a breakthrough at some point of time, but I'm not very optimistic it's going to be very soon. So this is a buzzword that is bandied about. Actually, if you look at the history of it, the buzzword has been bandied about since the 1980s, and the breakthrough has not happened. So yes, more and more, let's talk about like digitization basically. No? So moving things to computers rather than computer systems that are as powerful that they would allow artificial intelligence. More and more jobs of one particular segment of society are going to be lost in that way. And this segment, and this is something that's not normally happening when a new technology is coming in, this segment will not necessarily be the poor, it will be the middle class, but not the upper middle class. So basically that is a major problem for India. So this is a vocal part of the Indian population that will demand some kind of changes happen to address their own problems that are induced by changes in technology. Yet at the same point of time, what can you do in order to find employment? So that is something that will be a major problem for Indian economic planning in the coming decades. And it has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It's really just the onward march of computerization that we're talking about here. So therefore, yes, it will be inevitable. So this is something that education can only address, coming back to the topic of education and not wanting to go off too far into long-term projections of political economy. So education can address this by several policies, and one of them might be actually instilling more creativity so that people actually will be able to find means of coping. That's possible, but this is an argument that is very often brought about by exactly those people who will not want to help people in finding these means. So that's a problem that I have with it. Basically, making people more creative in order to find their own solutions to a problem that actually should be addressed by the state. That is something that is a major danger in India, because the Indian state has a tendency to wash its hands of the kind of problems that are being faced by people. Beyond that, sure, the quality of education in India can be improved. That might make it possible to find new forms of relatively skilled jobs for people that are going to lose, for middle class people that are going to lose these kind of jobs. So that is something that where I see a role for education in. But again, education can only give a supply side solution here. The big elephant in the room is the demand structure for jobs, which is in the Indian economy, basically. So does the Indian economy develop in a certain way where these people will be able to find this kind of employment where these skills that education is providing them can actually be used? And that is a major problem. I gave, maybe just to cap this at this level, so last year I gave a course with another colleague of mine at IMC on vocational training in India. And basically towards the end of it, one of the really good students in that course came up with an idea of saying, isn't all skilling policy in India skilling for unskilled jobs? And that is the main problem that I see in that respect. So basically you're skilling people, but the market itself does not have the demand for these kind of skills that are being instilled into people.
Yeah, you're actually basically skilling people, but in the long run, the S gets cut off. You're killing people actually, because it's not coming to any use for them later on. Right, thank you. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Smriti, we will be going, throwing it open for the students in a few minutes from now, just 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll go to the students and then to the audience as such, right? So I'm coming back briefly to Bratati. Now, is in the new education policy, postgraduate education, is it being devalued in any way? Is it reducing it to 1 year at the postgraduate level and abolishing MPhil? Is this going to devalue postgraduate education?
Okay. Now, but they are being open to research work. I don't consider it as devaluing it, because what we are saying is that from the 3-year degree course, we are increasing into 4-year, and they are being open to a research work, and they will be given, you know, for each year, they will be given a certificate, which was earlier not there. So it can be a BA B.Ed course, which they are going to, which eligible, you know, they become eligible for teaching in a school. And otherwise, if they are doing on a general course and if they are completing 4 years, then they can directly do the research work. Now, your question is whether it is devaluing postgraduate courses. Now, that is a debatable thing, because if today I am merging my course matter along with that 1 year, then it is, I don't think it is devaluing, because it is, again, end of the day, my learning outcome. If in those 4 years I am doing the postgraduate portion also, then how does it get devalued? But the universities may not think that way. Because most of the universities, we are doing the post-graduation courses. So the importance of the universities, that becomes questionable, because if today I'm giving autonomy to the colleges, and the colleges can, you know, have these courses, then what the university will particularly be looking into the research work. I think the focus area would be the research. Which is definitely a good move, I would say, because we would like people to come and do research. That is, I think, which I also pointed out right at the beginning. We are not having research work. I think the focus will be in a more positive way, I feel. This is my personal understanding. And I don't think anything is devalued. Nothing will be devalued, because end of the day, it should be a win-win situation.
Yeah, you're right. Nothing gets devalued except 1,000 rupee notes when they get demonetized. Yeah, right. Okay. Now, a kind of common question for Aditi and Sebastian together. If everything goes well with this proposed new education policy, where do the so-called institutions of excellence like the IITs and the IIMs stand? Will they become redundant?
Sebastian, would you like to take it first?
Yeah. It's a very good question that I actually have not considered, I have to say. So I don't really see redundancy, and if it would be in a positive way. No, so if some other institution, sorry, Aditi, if some other institution would come up, take over the role that something like an IIM is currently providing, I don't really see a problem of that, not from the point of view of a policy maker. There's nothing that's sacrosanct about IIMs.
Aditi, you want to add something to that? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Sebastian and I usually have similar thought processes. So yeah, I agree with what he just said. And I really hope that a policy which is such that it is giving a lot of importance to liberal arts, giving a lot of importance to multi-dimensional learning, and also bringing in various kinds of subject combinations with this credit system will only elevate what is going on in the IITs and IIMs today. I mean, we are all aware of, you know, the massive input that's going into the engineering education in India, which is this IIT-IIM combination, which people undertake. And I think these are brilliant students who end up doing this. But but any kind of good analytical work comes from a little bit of a multi-disciplinary perspective, and that we can all do with, and this is an experience I only had after joining IIM about a year and a half back, where I realized that whether it's faculty, whether it's the students, there is heavily one concentration on a particular disciplinary area. STEMs literally are overvalued, whereas various other subjects are crowded out. So I was always very concerned about that, and I'm just so glad that we've not followed the more global popular perspective of giving STEM a greater boost, but we've tried to be more inclusive in this idea, right? So I think that these structures will only make these institutions more competitive, better, more up-to-date, and more accommodative and inclusive. Yeah.
Just one
Right.
point.
Yes. Sebastian, you want to add something?
IIT, IIM complex. Since I stopped talking the last time on this idea of skilling for purposes that aren't actually used, think about it. So some of the best students in India, quite a number of them, go through an engineering education only to end up at a place like IIM Calcutta, where they will be trained for, let's say, marketing. That has absolutely nothing to do with engineering, and engineering doesn't help.
And then they sell credit cards.
Absolutely.
For an upmarket bank or something like that, yeah?
Right.
This is the kind of implementation of education policies that actually becomes botched over a period of time, because this wasn't what the idea was in the original time when the IIMs and IITs were coming up. No, so it's something that happened due to other factors, and so we will only be able to see the long-term impact of the NAP much later than now.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with Aditi that, it really makes us more, accommodating and inclusive. And definitely, I think it brings out the best in the person if you allow this, liberal education. It's not only engineering, because this is what Sebastian just said, that means, I have done engineering for whatever reason, and then I have again gone in for IIM. So those 5 years of my engineering, where does it go? So it's a waste of one's own energy, waste of everything.
And depriving somebody else of a seat in
Absolutely.
those days.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Then I have to make a confession at this stage that there are others like me who have graduated in civil engineering and end up moderating such discussions, So, right. We will now go on to the questions by the students. I think there are some designated students. Is it Ishita Saraf going to ask the first question?
I'll just put her on.
Yeah, Ishita Saraf from Modern High School. If you can't find Ishita first, then why don't you try to see whether Arushi Chaudhary is there from Loreto House?
Yes, I think.
Oh, you have found Ishita Saraf is there. Yeah. Ishita, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for sharing their insights into these aspects of education.
And make your question very precise and short, okay?
Okay. So, according to the new 4-year graduation program, students can achieve a diploma after 2 years of study and can have an option of dropping out. So, lower income students may be pressurized to drop out of studies and start contributing to their family incomes, because achieving a diploma can greatly increase their employability. So do you think that the option of dropping out and resuming studies at any other time is going to reduce the number of people who actually complete higher education from our country?
It's a very good question. Who among the panelists would like to take it voluntarily? Yes, Aditi.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thanks a lot, Ishita. I think it's a very relevant and an important thing to think about on what is the consequence of introducing flexibility. As everything else, it comes with 2 sides to the story. The first side is precisely why you said that lower income or people from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds, they get the ability to, if they have to for their family reasons, to really return back to education within a specific period of time. And the second problem is that by virtue of this flexibility, some of them may never return. They might just complete only 2 years. But if you look at this in a practical perspective, we should have presently only about 26-27% of those who come out of secondary schooling really make it to tertiary education. So the gross enrollment ratio in higher education is already a big suffering factor, right? So I think right now it's more important to get them in, even if it's with this flexible system for 2 years, and then gradually put in systems which encourages them to continue, right? So that's one point of view. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Aditi. Are you satisfied with the answer, Rishita?
I really
Has
am.
your question been answered? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We move on to Arushi Chaudhary with her question from Loreto House. Please
Good evening,
unmute your-
one and
yeah.
all present here. Okay, so the new education policy provides that students will gain an education in Hindi or the respective regional language till class 5, and will later on switch to English from class 6 onwards. So this will cause them to be more fluent in their different respective regional languages rather than in English. So won't this lack of a most accepted common language lead to disunity and regionalism among the Indians?
Bratati, would you like to take that?
Yeah, take it up.
Yeah.
You see, our country is diverse. We have different cultures. With different cultures also, we've always been united, haven't we? Today you go to any place, you know, it has its own set of dresses, own way of marriages, own different beliefs, everything, but still we are all united. So yes, language is communication, but here also we are talking about a language. You know, there are 3 languages. So English is not, we are not throwing away English. We are saying that there are 2 other languages that you can take. So English is going to remain. So it will be there and you can always communicate in that language.
Mm-hmm.
Does it answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, maybe partly, but not entirely. But because her question is more about if you are till class 5, grade 5, going to learn in a mother tongue or a local language, whatever it may be, then switching over later on to some other language, is that not going to disadvantage you in your further studies?
I don't think so, because you know it will not create any problems in or create disadvantage, because you see we are talking about technology also. The technology itself is going to help you to improve. So there will be translations done, which the technology will be doing it. I'm harping on technology. And you will be able to understand it. So if you want to communicate to somebody, so there will be a translator who can help you out.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good thing. I just need to sort of mention a little anecdote over here, Bratati, that when the Nobel laureate Günter Grass from Germany came to Calcutta and went back to Germany, there was an article which came in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and somebody gave it to me and said, you know, this is a kind of translation that Google Translate has done. Do you think it is more or less okay? So I went through that translation and I found out that wherever Günter Grass had mentioned the goddess Kali, it translated it as potassium. So with Google Translate, you can end up with this kind of things also sometimes. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for your question, Arushi. We move on to Sudiksha Basu from Sri Shikshayatan School.
A very good evening and a happy Independence Day to the esteemed panelists and all attendees. So my question to the panelists today is that the new education policy has claimed to pioneer some monumental changes like coding from the 6th standard, the introduction of vocational subjects, which acts as a great advantage for students that are currently in their formative years, granting them better career building opportunities. But for people like us, for instance, I'm currently in the 11th standard, and as for my contemporaries or my seniors, we will not be able to experience these changes as they won't be implemented completely before our exodus from the education system altogether. So do you think that we as students would lag behind or face a disadvantage in comparison with the new batch of students? If yes, how do we bridge the gap?
Okay, very good question, Sudiksha. Do you have any panelists particularly in mind who you would like this question to be addressed to? With Bratati Bhattacharya, there could be a clash of interests, as they call it. So perhaps Aditi or Sebastian could take this up.
Very briefly, I mean, that is a good question, there is no doubt, but I think for you and your batch, it will not have any impact whatsoever because the changes will be slow in coming. So you shouldn't worry about it. At some point of time, however, some students will want to worry about that. Will there be any kind of mechanisms to address these changes? I have absolutely no clue. I have to say, I don't know anything about that in the policy that would have addressed that. Maybe Aditi can fill in some gaps there.
Right. I was, in fact, Mr. Raman, thinking you'll ask, in fact, Bratati to pitch in here because she would probably understand what where Sudiksha's coming from.
Sudiksha doesn't have to ask her on the panel. She can ask her in school.
On her own. That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, Sudiksha, any education policy or any education change comes with delayed benefits. Nothing in education comes quickly. So anything that changes today comes not into benefit even for probably the generation or the cohort coming right after you, but probably 2 to 3 cohorts later, right? But here's hoping that it does come faster. I think if it does come faster, education by becoming better quality faster means that the people who are coming out of the education institutes are able to contribute to the economy in a better and a quicker way, which eventually leads to better economic growth, which works for you as well, right? So I come from a philosophy where there is gain at any level, it's gain for everybody in an economy. And so I'm quite hopeful that in fact that challenges you and gives you more economic opportunities later by virtue of us changing education today, right? Yeah.
All right, thank you. Sudiksha, thank you very much for your question. I see there are a couple of questions here also in the question box. There is a question from Ramanjit Kaur, and it says, what percentage of total compulsory subjects will be arts, music, dance, theater, etc., along with science, maths, geography, etc.? So what is the percentage of compulsory subjects vis-a-vis the subjects that you can choose to combine with those? Who would like to take that?
I don't think what she's asking, the question is, I don't think that is specified, and what I think Aditi right at the beginning had said, I'm just going to reiterate that only, that at present it is, it's a directional document, and all these percentage and other things will be informed much later. I don't think they have specified such things as, you need to have so many subjects with maybe science or so many subjects with arts, if I understand your question properly. That, you need to be a science student if you have so many number of subjects as which we call science. So when you get a degree, I think that's a question one can have, all this time we are having a BSc or a BCom or a, BA degree. So when you are having combination of subjects, what would be the end, whether it will be BSc BCom or a BA BCom. So maybe that is something which we need to figure out.
Okay, right. There is one more from a gentleman by the name of Suresh Shenoy from the United States of America. Historically, education in India has relied on learning by rote, what is available as published knowledge. It is important that the education system does 3 things. 1, teach children how to learn, and 2, build a culture for discovery and seeking knowledge beyond what exists in books. 3, make children grow to be productive citizens that can serve societal demands. Does the NEP serve these goals? Would any one of you like to take that?
Well, I think one positive point in the NEP is actually early instruction in the local languages, basically. That is likely to increase understanding of many aspects in a much broader, much more nuanced way than is possible for many of the students right now. So that is a step in the right direction in that way. As I said before, the idea of focusing at least to some extent more on liberal arts education will also increase creativity among students. But whether that actually leads to exactly these outcomes is not something that can be ascertained at a policy level, basically. So we, like Indian policymakers, can only react to what they see as the outcomes there. So we will not be able to say.
Mm-hmm. There's one more from Kanishka Agarwal, which says, what are your views on the 360-degree evaluation? Don't you think that peer review might enable bullying?
Peer review is only one aspect, you know, because that is not that you are judging a person only on peer review. So there are many other aspects, you know, which will be taken into account. And these are, again, you know, your authorities who are there wherever you are. They are the ones, you know, who will be looking into such things. So I think we have to leave it to them. And such things should not be, because I don't think this is something, you know, which will really hamper anybody's assessment when you are talking about a 360-degree criteria in judging a person.
All right. I also saw a question popping up in the chat box, and I would just formulate it very briefly because it was very long. It's basically asking about the digital divide. Do you think that it is going to be a reality that this digital divide is going to be bridged in the near future? And how do you otherwise address this kind of divide between the privileged and the not so privileged?
Right. If I can start with that, I'm doing, in fact, a lot of research on education technology and the availability of ICTs in India and across other countries in the world. And what I've realized is that there is definitely a digital divide in terms of the amount and access of ICT resources in the home environment across different countries within India, across different socioeconomic statuses. And because there is this divide where in certain households there are 5 ICT or information communication technology goods, and, you know, a laptop and an iPad and a mobile phone and so on and so forth. On the other hand, in some parts of India, we are still struggling with having a basic mobile network, right? So we have a lot of disparity nationally and internationally when it comes to the digital divide. I think in terms of access to these, you know, ICT technology, you know, the ICT at home, or it's very difficult for the government to really address that directly. But what is possible is by introducing technology and some use of computers and other things in school, you can still make up for it to some extent. Because at the end of the day, digital literacy has and is increasingly becoming a norm of the day. Like we cannot do much without being digitally active, especially now that we're in COVID-19. So we've got that plug as well, Mr. Raman, now. We just, you know, in the COVID-19 situation and how we are moving on with education technology, I don't think we can stay indifferent towards it anymore, right?
Absolutely.
So NEP sufficiently covers technology at this stage. Problem is we don't know what is good technology, what is bad technology, what is useful, what is not useful. I think that's where researchers come in. I think it's extremely important to collect evidence around this digital availability, how much of it is really good, what is effective and what is not effective. And it has to go, you know, policy making and research has to go hand in hand to really figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
So
one
that,
thing,
yeah, Sebastian, go ahead.
So one thing that is very often ignored in these technological solutions is the technological skills that people from not so privileged backgrounds have at the outset. So this is a major problem that will be there, and that will tend to reproduce inequity in Indian society to some extent. This is not something that really can be helped because, again, this is something that is inevitable. It will come. But this is something where at the level of schools, something can be done against it, but that in turn also reproduces the same kind of problems. Good schools tend to be those schools where good students are going and students from more privileged backgrounds are going. So those are the schools that can actually take measures for not so good students and on and on and on, basically. So this is a problem, and I don't see it really being addressed to the level that it needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. So that answers the question of Mehul Agarwal, a postgraduate student from St. Xavier's University. We'll take the last two questions now. There is a question from Kanishka Agarwal. Do you think it's a failure of the NEP to not address historically, in inverted commas, taboo subjects such as sex education? Would any of you who does not consider it a taboo subject, please take it up?
I certainly don't consider that a taboo subject, but I have to say that I have very little information about what the NEP is saying about these topics. So if it wouldn't address these points to the level that they need to, I would consider that to be a failure, actually.
Okay.
I just want to add something to what Sebastian said. I think it's not just about taboo subjects like sex education. It could be about things related to the modern cultures we are living in. You know, single families, having a child out of wedlock, probably just like kind of living in disputes, so on and so forth. So there's a lot which can be addressed through proper education curricula. And I think there's a ray of hope because the NEP does talk about mental health counseling, going and meeting specific individuals within the school complexes. How we will post those people there in rural areas and urban areas, I'm not sure about the logistics, but there is hope that there is someone to reach out to when you truly want to understand something. That view of hope is there, but you're absolutely right. The taboo still remains a taboo, and there's no explicit mention of sex education at all in the NEP. Yeah.
Okay. And now the final question from an anonymous attendee. I don't know why the attendee is anonymous. What decides the medium of instruction in a cosmopolitan city with children speaking in various mother tongues?
I think this is a very, very apt question and very, very challenging question. Yes. Again, I would harp on the fact that we are a diverse country and definitely the language issue is there. But if I go at the national level and talk about education learning outcomes, if I find a particular language which is easy for me to understand, and if my learning happens, then I would agree with that. I'm not only talking about a privileged school or anything, I'm talking India as a whole. Because here we are debating on the enrollment ratio. If by giving this ease, it becomes easy for children to go to, at the early stage learning where their parents understand and can teach them, then, this is a very good move. But yes, if you have to be connected globally, then definitely you need to have one single language for the country where everybody understands that. So I agree with that also.
Okay, that is as good a note to end on Independence Day. I think we have been at it for more than 90 minutes now, and that is a lot of screen time for people. They say that you should give people relief from screen time, otherwise screen fatigue is going to set in. So I would like to thank all the panelists, Bratati, Aditi, and Sebastian, for all your inputs, which made this discussion worthwhile and lively, and Smriti for having organized this and having asked us to participate in this discussion. Thank you all. Thank you very much.